back at it with our latest live edition of Big Mets Updates. In tonight's show, I will be accompanied right around a half hour from now, so right around 8 p.m. Eastern at the time of recording this. My good friend and host there of SNY and the New York Post, Dexter Henry, will be joining me later this evening, folks, to break down his thoughts on all the latest in these Juan Soto sweepstakes, especially from his perspective, from his point of view, as a guy there who's working every single day there in the city, hearing everything regarding the Yankees, hearing everything regarding the Mets. We're going to hear Dexter's more expanded thoughts on the Soto sweepstakes and just the Mets in general, as they're definitely going to be making plenty big moves this offseason, not named Juan Soto. But of course, the discussion that we're going to highlight tonight, which is why you're likely watching this live and on replay, before we do an amazing roll call to all you guys and gals chiming in, thank you so much for that. We're going to highlight how, yes, further details have actually come out over the past couple hours at the time of recording this from Mad Dog Russo on, yes, the Mets and their meeting with Juan Soto. What was different from their meeting with Soto versus every other team? And ultimately, is this something to be positive about or negative about as Mets fans? From there, we're going to get into how Juan Soto trolled a lot of fans today, and how a lot of fans hyper-analyzing there a video that he came out with earlier today, trying to figure out where is he going to land, when is he going to land, and everything in between. And not only on the bidding war officially beginning, as the Mets are one of 5 teams joining the Toronto Blue Jays, the Boston Red Sox, the New York Yankees, and the LA Dodgers for Soto's services. We're going to also touch on the starting pitching market there before we wrap up the show, and how that market is heating up already with Yusei Kikuchi going to the LA Angels, and what moves are surely inevitably on the horizon for the Mets this offseason. That and more, folks, is what we're about to deep dive. But before we get into it all, before I break down plenty that I want to initially react to you guys before I bring Dexter in, let's do a quick roll call to all my live viewers, folks. If you guys are watching replay, let us know your biggest takeaway in the comments down below. And don't worry, I will have timestamps for all my replay viewers shortly after this has been live. That way, if you guys want to jump to hearing just about this topic on Soto or just this topic on Blake Snell, don't worry, we will have you covered here with timestamps shortly after it's been live. But I see Poppy, Danny, how you doing? Daniel Berry, how you doing? JT, John Rossi, great member. Joe, my man, Dave Kaplitz, great member, great friend. Carlos Ortiz, Frankie Almeida, how you doing? Poppy Caps, how you doing? Shock going up the list. Ryan, great member. Gregory, Julio going up the list. D-Run, how you doing? Sean, Frank Major, Jacob, my amazing editor. Malone in here. Mike Nixon, great member. Dominic, longtime member. How are you, my man? Hope all is well. Mike Norden, longtime follower. Carlos Ortiz, if I didn't say him already. We got Will Eva in here. We're going up the list. Camille, how are you? I really don't know. How are you? Jeffrey Spen, thank you so much for taking the time this evening. Going up here, Scott H, Danny, again, thank you guys so much. Alex, Explosive, BC, Ron, of course, there's one little fly around, so I know I need to try to nip it mid-live show. That's what we're going to try to make happen. But thank you guys so much for spending your evening, your early start to the day, whenever you're watching this, with your guy Wardy, as we're breaking down the latest on the Juan Soto sweepstakes. And I know, guys, let's just start there. I'm tired of it too. I'm not tired of the Juan Soto sweepstakes in the sense of how great it's been for the traction of the channel. I'm never complaining about that from a creator perspective, but from a fan perspective, as someone who just wants to know where Soto is for certain going to land and when, I too am tired of all the little updates, because of course they slow roll, but at the same time, it does get me further excited. But I think I'm at a point as a Mets fan where I'm really trying to suppress that Mets fan bias aside with excitement, because I know I'm going to get my hopes up big time if the Mets don't land Soto in his services. So I'm trying to stay even keeled throughout the entire thing. I'm really trying my best to not really focus on much of the Soto sweepstakes outside of when I'm going on my way to cover it each day. But man, it's getting tough. We're really getting to the point now where, okay, offers are already in. We know that a decision will likely be made either before the winter meetings or right in the heart of the winter meetings, which is what I firmly believe is this prime time for Scott Boras to have his most coveted agent in so many years go out with a bang there in winter meetings after a very anticlimactic winter meetings a year ago, and they're in Nashville. Fast forward a year later there, from December 9th to the 11th or so, there in San Antonio, Texas. I have a feeling that's where we're going to see the big bang, which is Juan Soto making his decision this offseason. But guys, before we get into the latest details there that I'm really excited to share with you all, if you guys didn't already, please make sure to check out my segment that I did in the Bleacher Report app earlier today, as your guy Wardy did at least 10 top MLB offseason predictions. I talked about Soto, I talked about Alonso, I talked about all the starting pitching targets that we're going to touch on today for the most part, and then some. Check out that segment there if you guys haven't already. It is live in the Bleacher Report app. Just literally go to bleacherreport.com if you're watching on your desktop, or there on the app, you know, at your fingertips with ease. Go to MLB and just go to MLB Rumors, and right away you're going to see the long version and then the clipped version especially if you go to, say, a Mets and Bleacher Report app. I'll pop up right away, and you'll see me talking about Soto, Alonso, and everything in between for you guys to comment or poll with. But thank you guys for doing that. Shout out to our amazing sponsors always at BetUS that has you covered with all your sports betting needs. But a little bit more on them later on in today's show, folks. Let's just start by saying that, listen, when I saw the report last night initially from NJ.com, they're on the beat for the New York Yankees, and Randy Miller, shout out to him, Randy. It was not John Morosi. Wow, shocking. John Morosi wasn't the first to have news. It's almost like that's the case with everything John tweets. It comes from someone else, and that's fine. No less Randy Miller, who was the first to reportedly have that the Mets were one of 5 teams that have entered the sweepstakes for Soto, to the point that they have now sent a contract out. We fast forward to today, which we started the discussion, our video separate earlier on the channel. Check that out in a condensed version, folks, if you want to hear the latest on the Mets contract offer officially out there. But what we know is that the Mets are one of 5 teams, and we also know that the Mets, unlike any other team going after Soto and everything that comes with him, is that the Mets just have so much money to work with there, a financial flexibility unlike any other, unlike even what the Phillies are trying to throw out. If they get a meeting with Juan Soto there after having over $300 million further invested in the organization across 3 investors that we found out not too long ago, whether it's the LA Dodgers maybe on deferred payments saying, hey, come join our evil empire, our version of the Golden State Warriors, and let's win championships for the next north of a decade plus. And then you also look at the Yankees there with all the reigns, all the pedigree, all the championship desire, and all what it means to be, one of the best in the game. You think of New York Yankees, so of course they're going to be putting right to the top of the list everything that they are as an organization and why you should be staying here, Juan Soto. The Boston Red Sox there, the big bad Boston Red Sox, the 2018 champ Red Sox with our JD Martinez, and now the Cy Young Award winning Atlanta Braves, Crick and Chris Sale, which we're all bothered by still. Not that Sale won it, but that the Red Sox couldn't get him right before trading him off to Atlanta, mind you. No less, all these teams, they have financial flexibility to varying degrees. The Red Sox have a heavier emphasis than previous off seasons to spend. Okay, the Yankees have an emphasis to spend because they can't lose Juan Soto to the Mets of all teams. The complexion of not only the market, but how New York baseball is perceived for the next 10, 15 years will be forever changing should that happen. And no, that's not an exaggeration. That's the truth. I firmly believe the Yankees care just as much about bringing Juan Soto back as they do on the perception that they will have across Major League Baseball and across rivaling markets when looking at the impact of losing a superstar in Soto's magnitude, stature, our version of Barry Bonds nowadays, to then come to the Mets. That's not a smart thing to do. And the Yankees want to avoid that perception and that backlash as much as humanly possible. Having said all that, there's no one that's strutting in like Steve Cohen with a lot of deep pockets saying, listen, all of our bad contracts are off the books now, essentially. JV's out of here. Scherzer's out of here. James McCann's contract is finally out of here. Robinson Cano, we haven't been paying for a bit now. We're all done. We're done. We are done when it comes to those things. We just got a lot of money to spend. We were 2 games shy of the World Series last year when we made lateral moves in the offseason the year prior. Why shouldn't I go scorched earth for Juan Soto? I'll give you everything and then some that you want, Juan. All it's going to come down to is your personal preference. Do you want to be here? If you want to be here, what else is there to negotiate? We have the money. No one's going to trump us in the dollars. People might get relatively close, but that's because of Cohen's unwillingness to go farther, which there's been no reason to believe whatsoever that wouldn't be the case. Why wouldn't Cohen go absolutely bananas for Soto unlike any other? The perception that, this is the same circumstance as Yamamoto, it's so far from it. And all it takes is just a rational baseball fan to put 2 and 2 together to understand that, putting all the media aside, putting Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal, what we have there, Bob Nightingale, everyone and their mother that have Juan Soto going to the Mets right now, either as their personal prediction, belief, or what's been a widespread belief according to rival executives. The reason for this is because of everything that the Mets have to offer here, which is what separates themselves even from teams like the Yankees. And even when we look at the Yamamoto sweepstakes from a year ago, he grew up a diehard Dodgers fan, for one. So the media perception was completely wrong that, he idolized the Yankees organization so much. Maybe it was, but it was also overblown that we are aware of. The Yankees didn't come second. They came in 3rd or 4th in the sweepstakes for Yamamoto. The Mets didn't land Yamamoto not because of a lack of effort, but because his preference wasn't to be here. It was the Dodgers. That's all it's going to come down to. Furthermore, the Mets will not find themselves in a bidding war to the extent where they don't go farther than 325, say that they maybe would have for the Dodgers, because they knew that there was no point because Yamamoto had made his decision. He moved the contract laterally there to the Dodgers and say, hey, match this and I'm yours because I want to be in LA and this is a price point that I'm comfortable with. Rest is history. In the case of Soto, there is not going to be one single bidder out there that puts up the exact dollar amount that we see Steve Cohen put by the end of this bidding war. The Mets don't land him. Okay, that's because he doesn't want to be here. That's because of other things that are going in favor of, say, the Yankees, or maybe somehow, some way, the Red Sox, or what would make sense to a degree, the Dodgers, even at a lesser contract, because maybe it's high AAV with opt-outs after a couple years, and he's just trying to win a chip while still getting the absolute bag. Whatever the situation may be, when it comes to the Mets and their willingness to spend, that is one of the few things that is not going to hold them back, what would have otherwise held them back completely under the Wilponzian regime. It is so night and day, it's actually not even funny, because the Mets have the wealthiest owner in baseball by far, and he's just a diehard fan that's willing to spend. Ferrari Frank, how you doing? Ryan, great member. Daniel Hayes, great member. Mike C, Jacob, AJ, Nando, thank you guys so much for taking the time watching live on a replay. We appreciate you guys. Web Loves with the $5 holla says the following: Cohen should offer Soto a take it or leave it deal, 15 years, $750 million, no deferred money, opt-outs after 5 and 10 years. An opt-out after 5 years would bring Juan Soto to his age 31 season. I have a feeling he actually might want an opt-out right before hitting, 30. Might be that 28, 29, 30 range. I don't know if he'd wait till 31. But again, it is my money, so by all means, Webb's Love, let's just throw it all at him. Let's do it together, because it's not our money to spend. But what is the money to spend is Steve Cohen and the hundreds of millions that he's going to be more than willing to do here for the sake of Juan Soto and services. So much so that there is a differentiator that we know between the two, between the Mets and their pursuit versus the pursuit by the Yankees, by the Dodgers, by the Red Sox, by the Blue Jays, what have you. And that is the following, everybody. Let's listen in to the latest remarks that we heard on Mad Dog show with John Heyman, or one of their shows. I don't want to mistake the two, but let's just listen in on what they had to say in the following, folks. This is very important. And also shout out to David, Colazzo for initially clipping this. Follower of mine. Appreciate you, David. Thank you so much for that. And also, guys, before we wrap up the show, at some point, I have to tell you an insane story during my time roaming around Manhattan yesterday and how the day ended that I'm really excited to share. But let's listen in first.
A little quicker than normal, which I love. And, I think he's going to probably, I didn't think so. I thought he'd re-sign with the Yankees, but I got a funny feeling he might go to the Mets. I know that the only visit that he made to a mansion, you wrote about this, was to Steve Cohen's house in Beverly Hills. I do think that.
So I'm going to continue. I'm going to run the entire video here, but just let that marinate for a second. So, according to John Heyman, what he initially wrote, but it was reaffirmed here by Mad Dog Russo, is the following. The Mets, unlike any other team that met with Juan Soto, at least throughout the first round of meetings, we don't know if there will be second or third rounds. At least we don't know in the public eye right now. But what we do know is that Steve Cohen had Juan Soto and Scott Boras over to his LA mansion while everyone else went and had to meet there with Boras wherever that they were holding the meetings at. So just a further flex on how Steve Cohen separates himself from the rest in this so-called bidding war, for whatever you want to call it. Steve is just out here casually flexing without a problem, similar to how he had Yamamoto at his place, as we know, there in Long Island, or pardon me, maybe that was in Connecticut. Either way, we know that he had Yamamoto, and even though that Yamamoto didn't stay, ended up landing with the Mets, it wasn't for a lack of effort on the Mets' end that we are aware of. Should we buy into this at all outside of what it is at face value for what it is that, okay, Steve was able to have them over just because of how much wealthier of an owner he is? I think you should buy into this a bit more. And I think when it comes to the personability of who Steve Cohen is as an owner and how much he cares as a fan about this negotiation process, I think that this is just yet again another example of what separates himself from the rest here. He's going to have his way to have people at his home when... or any other ownership group that are going out of their way to meet Soto doing this? No, it's the opposite. And it's not just because, oh, Steve Cohen has an LA mansion. Not every other owner has an LA mansion. No. You know how easy it is for these guys to just set themselves up somewhere really pretty, really nice, where the owners are the ones inviting them. I think that this says a lot about Steve Cohen and his continued character and how much he prioritizes these negotiations from a fan point of view, to the extent that saying, hey, just come here. We'll take care of you. We'll give you a nice service, everything in between. We're going to show you what it's like to be essentially owned, even though that we're not trying to label it as owning people, but the way that Steve Cohen would own the contract of Juan Soto, and what Juan Soto, the type of treatment that he would potentially be getting if he comes to the Mets under Steve Cohen. This is a little sliver of exactly that. And that's where Juan Soto, who has a big appetite for the dollars, more than recent years free agents, to the extent that not named Shohei Ohtani, this man is going to be getting a record-breaking deal of north, if not more, than $700 million effing dollars. He's going to be prioritizing the bag, and he's going to be prioritizing all the little details in between on how the organization is ran for not only now, but for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Who is currently in those positions? Will they be staying in those positions long-term? And ultimately, what is the ownership's willingness to not only spend, but try to win and do their best efforts in winning year in and year out? Please enlighten me. Please, I'll listen. By all means, we'll take some time. Enlighten me on what other owner in Major League Baseball is more willing to go the greater lengths for an organization than what Steve Cohen has done since buying the team. I mean, there is none, simply put. As amazing as the Dodgers are, and they are certainly amazing, they are not in a position like the Mets are, even to the same degree where you have to separate talent alone, too. The Dodgers are very, very appealing that we know when it comes to their star power as is. But Juan Soto's always struck us as a guy that loves to be in the spotlight, as a man that's leaned the way in that regard. He would be your third, fourth star there in LA to pair with Ohtani, Yamamoto, and of course, Freeman Betts, just one of the many Avengers there, one of the many Infinity Stones there for Thanos. Or you could come to Queens, where you are the face of the organization, paired with Francisco Lindor, and the rest is history. But you're still clearly, clear as day, our number one player. You're not our captain, but you're our number one player. Even in the Bronx, he's overshadowed to a degree by Aaron Judge. Not overshadowed when it comes to high leverage situations, playoff moments, because Juan Soto actually does this thing called stepping up when you're supposed to, something that the Polar Bear did brilliantly in the postseason, which no one expected in a lot of ways, including myself, after how much he was dragging his feet along throughout the course of the year. But I'm getting on tangent. Let's get back into these further remarks here from Heyman and Mad Dog, because then in right around 10 minutes or so, we're going to bring in our guy Dexter Henry to hear his thoughts on the Juan Soto sweepstakes, the bidding war, and what is next for the Mets, not only on Soto, but the starting pitching market this offseason.
Cohen can offer the most money. And if it's about money, which, 99% of the time it is, I think the Mets will have the leg up. They're coming off a big year. It's New York. He's got Lindor. We all know, you know better than anybody, that when the Mets are good, they're as much charming and they're as much a factor in New York as the Yankees are. So it's not like he's signing with the Nets, leaving the Knicks. I mean, he's, or the Jets and Giants. This is the Yankees and the Mets, and they can be equal when they're both good. So I think at the end of the day, I don't think he's going to the Dodgers. I don't think he's going to Toronto. Why would you go to Canada? You wrote last week, were they lousy? Why would you go there? I don't think the Phillies, I think they like to be involved, but I don't think he's going there. I think it's going to be the Yankees or the Mets, and I wouldn't rule out the Yankees. But right now, I think the decision will be by the end of the winter meetings, and I do think that the Mets are the leading contender right now, because nobody can spend more money than Cohen. We all know that he's got the most money, and if it's 99% of the time it is about that, I think Cohen feels very comfortable that he did a good job with his meeting there, or whatever it was last week. I think he felt that he set the table well with his team, talking to Soto. So I think maybe right now the Mets are the leading clubhouse contender. And then, as you said, we'll find out about everybody else. Alonso, find out about the pitchers. I think once Soto goes, you'll see a lot of guys move pretty quickly here. I think you really will.
Okay, so great stuff there from Mad Dog Russo. Whether you love him or hate him, there was no lies told that the Mets had themselves a separation in their meeting versus any other ownership group or anyone in general from front office down that went out of their way to meet Juan Soto and for his services this offseason. So Mets fans, I'm definitely curious, how do you guys feel? To our live viewers, to our replay viewers in the comments down below, do you think that the latest move that we heard Steve Cohen going out of his way to have Boris Soto and everyone else and co at his LA mansion versus the other way around for everyone else, do you think that that is a further advantage for this Mets team? If not, let me know why in the chat, everybody, because I can understand we naturally have cautious optimism at best for some of you guys, pessimism at best for some of you guys, depending on who we're talking to in Metsland, because you do connect things to a degree with Yamamoto, but we simply can't do that. Steve Cohen has famously had pretty much anyone that he's wanted throughout the offseasons in the free agent market that are, upper echelon free agents to target at his place. It's just been majority of the time we have seen more so there in New York and Connecticut area versus there in LA, where we know that Boris and his camp, everyone is based. So it made more sense why that was happening there for one, but for two, I think it just further shows how Steve Cohen tries his best at least to separate himself from other owners when it comes down to being as personable as possible, as relatable as one can be for a guy that's worth over $22 billion, and at the end of the day, a guy who just wants to win as a diehard fan. That is what this comes down to. The same way that we have seen with other ownership groups across other major sports in years past. When they come in because they're a diehard fan, there's a completely different complexion, and there's a completely different meaning to what their emphasis is as an owner. This is not Steve Cohen looking for a fantastic ROI or return on investment for the Mets organization each and every year. He knows that he will have plenty of losses and has had since he bought the team at like $3 billion or whatever it was. As we fast forward to today, though, this is a Mets team that when it comes to overall value, merchandise, marketing, everything between has been skyrocketing since Cohen has become owner. Just imagine what it would do with Juan Soto. I'm not saying that that is at all a priority for the Mets, for anyone saying, are the Mets even going to get their ROI on someone like Juan Soto in particular, if you're really going to invest $700+ million? And the answer is the marketing alone will certainly be there. And if Soto just plays to his potential, yes, obviously the latter half of the contract, you don't like the idea of it living up to expectations, but one, it comes down to winning championships. That's the most important thing. Two, it's how can you get there? It's guys like Juan Soto that help lead the way. And it's three, and this is a very important aspect, it's people that know how to dominate and know how to do it right as a leader in New York. And that is so rare, that is so hard to come by, and Soto proved his ability to do everything and then some in such a short period of time. Then you look at, okay, the marketing aspect that comes with Soto, the merchandising aspect that comes with Soto. Who knows how much money the Mets would make, but listen, I know it's separate because you're not only dealing with LA, but you're dealing with the entire country of Japan. But the amount of ROI that we saw Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers received because of Ohtani signing year one, which many believe, speculated, was north of $1 billion. So yeah, I mean, like absolutely absurd amount. People were saying at least 100 million from what I heard. Regardless, they profited so much off of Ohtani in year one, which is exactly why not only them winning a championship, but all the other little details that come into play throughout the next decade of Ohtani being there is going to be well worth the contract that he's at of $700+ million. It's bananas, but it's certainly a fascinating one to follow as we look for all the latest with Juan Soto and the Mets' heavy interest in said player. But guys, before we bring in my man Dexter here shortly, I do want to share with you guys Juan Soto and his troll job today. And then actually, you know what? I definitely want to know your initial reactions to it. I'm going to hear from my man Dexter as well how he feels about it. All right, guys, a moment of truth. Juan Soto, pardon me for the eardrums there. Juan Soto and his big decision. What is it going to be? And this is what he posted on Instagram earlier today. Listen up and watch it in case you guys didn't already earlier today.
This wasn't an easy decision, but after meeting with the team, it became clear what I wanted to be. That being said, Team Celsius. What? You were expecting a different announcement?
So as soon as I saw this clip, I obviously wasn't expecting to be a decision. Right away, I thought it was promo, just based on kind of the blandness of it all. A lot of fans, mainly Yankee fans and pessimistic Mets fans, read into this and said, oh my God, Juan Soto has a navy blue little bomber on, a normal white button down, and the Celsius hat is navy blue with, a navy blue and white, basically a roping right across the top, like the most stereotypical like golf hat that you'll probably see out there. That is a very normal colorway to have, especially given the fact that his last team was the Yankees. I'm not buying into the coloration of his outfit whatsoever, but I did want to emphasize this and bring this to light to some of you guys that haven't seen it today, because Soto, again, taking full advantage of his current sweepstakes, and honestly, nothing short of brilliant marketing. I was just hitting up my bite and I said, if the Mets land Juan Soto, I'm going to do everything in my power to get a Celsius sponsorship, because it's perfect pairing, seriously. Even if I'm not going to be pounding it constantly because I'm not a huge energy drink guy. I would gladly promote, especially if it would be after the Mets would land Soto and everything that he would bring to Queens. But great promo by Juan Soto. Simply put, I mean, that's exactly how you market. And leading into now the winter meetings, a week and a half away or so, we are going to have ourselves a massive decision, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yes, he's absolutely toying with us, as he liked tweets favoring the Yankees and favoring the Rockies, among others. So for some people that want to really buy in stock at all to his decisions on, oh my goodness, I just liked someone's tweet that says, stop toying with us, that had like a hashtag for Yankees in it. Same way that we saw a Talking Baseball reply back in an Instagram post. Oh my God, you're signing with the Rockies. He liked that too. So again, he's just having fun with this entire sweepstakes. I personally wouldn't buy into the outfit at all. However, again, if Soto goes back to the Yankees, no one should be shocked at all by that. We just have an expectation and a hope as Mets fans that he comes here for all the reasons that we've been finding ourselves talking about. Michael Saya, thank you so much for the donation, my man. Great job, Wardy. Sorry I haven't been on, working on a lot. Enjoy your channel. Michael, I enjoy you, my man. Thank you so much for taking the time, and please don't feel the need to apologize whatsoever. I haven't been able to be as live consistently each week as much as I'd like to this point. That's why we pumped out a lot of individual content, but individual video content. But really happy to be back here to breaking down all the latest with you, my man. So thank you so much for chiming in. Appreciate your donation, your membership, and your continued support. Guys, thank you so much for chiming in live at a replay. Continue to let us know your thoughts on the Juan Soto sweepstakes. And now talk about Juan Soto, the Mets in general, and their future upcoming offseason moves. Let's bring in our good friend here in Dexter Henry. Okay, let's see. Give me 1 second, Dexter. Let's move the camera here to the side a bit. Just looks good. Camera looks fantastic, Dexter. You were ready to go for this one.
Hey, I try.
Awesome. Okay, let's get that muted. Perfect. Okay. Dexter, talk for me. Just make sure the audio is coming through.
Wardy, what's up, man?
Awesome. All right. I think we hear you loud and clear. Everyone watching live, please let us know if we hear you guys perfectly fine too. For Dexter's audio, we appreciate that. A shout out to my guy, Dexter Henry. For those that don't know, he's a host there at the SNY and New York Post for daily segments that we see all the time there, especially in their sports short segments, which I've had the privilege of being a part of multiple times. So Dexter, I'm so happy to have you on. Really happy to chop it up on Juan Soto on this platform this time around. So how you doing tonight, my man?
No, I'm good. I'm good tonight, man. It's been good. I've loved your work for a long time. You are one of the best. I always say that when you come on with me in terms of Mets content creation. And so I'm honored that you have me here on your platform that I love. So I'm a fan. So, you know that. So, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dexter. I appreciate that. And I think this is a perfect segue into talking about, yourself being a fan, because I actually had myself such an awesome interaction today, which I'd love to share with you and everyone. Now, some of you guys have already seen this because I tweeted it on X a day or so ago, but I was just hanging out in Manhattan, like gallivanting for most of the day yesterday, had myself a fantastic time. And as I'm about to head home, I'm in Penn Station, and I go to customer service because the closest bathroom was closed off for whatever reason. I didn't know where to go. I'm not at Penn Station too often. So I go up there to customer service, and the worker walks into the part where he needs to talk to me when there's the glass in between us, and he just turns his phone around and he's watching the latest video that I recorded hours prior. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, I can only imagine his initial reaction in his head, because he's here probably on break just watching the video, right? And then he looks up and I'm just standing there. The trippiest thing I've ever witnessed. He was the most kind individual ever. Shout out to Lamont, we appreciate you. He was really, really nice. And yeah, that was just such a cool interaction. I've interacted with many people who follow my work in person, but that was the first time that I caught them in the act, actively watching me, and then for me to show up. That's like the equivalent of me watching a movie, and then the actor that literally I'm just watching the movie, I've just walks up right at the door and says, "Hey, how you doing?" Like that's a whirlwind. So really cool to meet Lamont.
You know what's funny? That is cool for you. That happened for the first time for me a couple of months ago. It was right at the end of the regular season for the Mets. It was like literally during the Milwaukee series. I remember the Milwaukee series. I remember this. I'm on the train, and a guy, I guess, was watching some video I'd done the day before, and just he looked at me and was like, and across me, he just turned and showed it to me, and I was like, yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really a surreal feeling too, especially when it happens in instances that you don't expect it. Like when I'm at Mets games, I expect to interact with people because I know it's easier for people to flag me down and see a short guy wearing a Wardy shirt. It's pretty easy. Whereas if I'm just hanging out in town, for example, because I live in Pennsylvania, and I've had people flag me down in town a couple times. That's really got me. I'm like, wow, like we're even in completely different states, not all in the area. I'm like, that's bizarre, but it just shows how much of an outreach we have to the audience of Mets fans, Yankee fans, and New York sports in general, which is perfect now to hop on the topic here. And Dexter, before I even highlight, all the key details on everything with Soto at this point, what has been your point of view as someone who's been covering the Yankees and the Mets every single day there for SNY New York Post, from people that you've talked to, respective in the industry, to just kind of what you've been hearing on the streets and experiencing as a fellow sports fan yourself?
Yeah, I'm the thing I'm hearing is funny. I was just talking to somebody today about this that's around the Mets, and it's just that everything's up in the air, right? Like that's the thing you even hear. You're gonna hear from some people that the Mets, had an inside track, maybe with them having the first offer, but now you even hearing with the news that came out today, right? That like Soto's going to take multiple rounds of offers, which is insane. And I heard you talking about this a little bit before I came on, right? And just how Soto has been trolling us all, like dragging this all out in a way, right? Which is, look, it's great marketing, right? It keeps the interest up. It keeps the interest up. You're 100% right about that. It keeps the interest up through the winter meetings. Now, me personally, and I'll get back to some of the stuff I'm hearing, but me personally, I wish baseball had better free agency, because I feel like it's too drawn out, right? Like it's too drawn out. One of the things I love with the NFL and the NBA is that, look, when that clock strikes 12 or whenever free agency starts, it's like we're just going. This is a waiting game. And look, Soto holds the cards to everybody else, right? Right, Wardy, we know this. And, you will see. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people around that I talk to that cover the team that's around the Mets is like, look, the Mets have as good a chance as anybody to get this done. And a lot of it is because of what Steve Cohen is going to sell in terms of not just the money, but the vision they have in terms of building a team. And I think their selling point is, look, do you want to come and build upon what the Mets really started, which was, to be fair, for I think a lot of Mets fans, quicker rebuild process than they expected here in 2024. So that's been accelerated. The culture seems to be good. You've got to like what's going on with the manager. That's the selling point for the Mets. But look, it's going to be a tough decision. I think the Mets can offer the most money, but we still do not know, all of us. And this goes to people, insiders, people who are close to this. What does Juan Soto want? That is the question, Wardy. What does he want? Nobody's been able to answer that question for me. Like, what does he value? Obviously, I know all the people watching in the chat are like, Dex, he wants to get paid. Yeah, we know that. Yeah. He absolutely wants to get paid. Just a little
bit, like at least 700 million.
We all do, right? But beside the money, I do think, I don't know of any insight on this, but I do think the culture will matter to him. And I wonder how exactly the Mets are selling him on what the culture is, as opposed to what he's seen with the Yankees and he's already experienced, right?
Right.
He has that comfortability that he was with the Yankees. They went to the World Series, obviously, but the Mets can say, hey, we're in an upward trajectory. They can tell them on how much else they're going to spend, who else they're going to bring in, what's the 3-year plan, what's the 5-year plan. It's all this stuff. So what I'm hearing from a lot of people is, I don't know, but the Mets have a good a shot as anybody to get this done. I don't think this is fool's gold. I also will, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, I don't think it's the end of the world for the Mets if they do not land Juan Soto.
No, it's far from it. And I think for me, I will have the same sentiment, if not harder, on if they lose out on Soto, like I did with Yamamoto last offseason, just because I really talked myself into Yamamoto by time that he made his decision. Like, I was very close. Whereas Soto, I'm in a very similar situation right now. So, like, everyone's like, Wardy, what's your thoughts on if the Mets don't land Juan Soto? We'll talk about it. But the reason why I haven't went out of my way is because I don't even want to put that into existence yet until I have to worry about that.
Stay away from the bad energy, Wardy. Stay away.
Because one, we're going to have to talk about that then, should it happen. You know what I mean? So it really doesn't change much. But two, this is such a unique one with Soto where, yes, it makes endless sense why the Mets are going out of their way to try to land him right now. But yes, if the Mets don't land Juan Soto, I still have equal confidence as I did prior in David Stearns and Steve Cohen and this new regime for the Mets. Like, they have proven their ability to go out and really let their work do the talking, especially with a lack of pressure and lack of expectation after falling 11 games below 500 like they did in 2024. The big question now for the Mets, and this is the one that they have yet to really answer outside of what I will give them massive credit for, their continued run throughout the year heading into postseason play, but it's how do you handle expectations? Because the Mets were the the underdog all in 2024, given how piss poor they started the year. How can they handle 2025 in a circumstance with or without Soto? Without Soto, your expectations are still astronomical. You're expected to go all the way close to the World Series, as close as you possibly can. The Mets had expectations in 2023. Look what happened. Nothing went in their favor for various reasons, right? Then you get in, if you land Juan Soto, the expectation then is to a higher magnitude that's ever been for Steve Cohen as owner. How did they live up to those expectations, right? So that, I think, is part of the selling job, along many other things. And what I would love to rattle off for you, Dexter, is what we know to this point for what Soto is essentially looking for, what we know reportedly. And I want you and your opinion to share in regards to, do you think that that is enough to favor the Mets or to favor the Yankees or maybe some other teams? And they are as follows. We know that apparently, according to reports at least, that Juan Soto has an emphasis not only on getting the most money, which has been the worst kept secret in baseball the past 3 years, but it's been more so on the team's ability to have structure, sustained winning, and really what is their culture going to be for the years going forward. So to further expand on this, when the Yankees had their meeting with Soto, one of the point emphasis was, how are you guys going to upgrade for next year? You know, what are you going to do to different aspects of this lineup? Because as we saw, and you saw too, Dexter, as talented as the Yankees were throughout the course of the year, they were a three-headed monster. And when that three-head became a two-headed monster, it got a lot more difficult. When Judge wasn't able to step up down the stretch in postseason play, Giancarlo Stanton was simply remarkable, and he deserves all of his flowers for that. But outside of Soto, they had no depth in the lineup whatsoever. They completely lacked fundamental baseball, in part because of their bad contracts, which is why they still throw out the DJ LeMahieu's of the world, etc. Anthony Rizzo, in which they have now declined his option for 2025, among other things, because they just didn't have a proper structure. Hal Steinbrenner has had a stubbornness, especially since that $300 million tax threshold, to really go over that, let alone touch that at that 90% tax rate. Why am I supposed to believe that now? Okay, because Soto is such a generational talent, which we know he is, but now we're going to see Hal Steinbrenner finally change the narrative and go out of his way to spend north of $700 million when he already has Garrett Cole locked up. He has Judge locked up. He has Stan locked up. And he has other dead weight in DJ LeMahieu, Marcus Stroman, who I know that they've been trying to deal or are planning to this offseason as well. The big question is, dude, the Yankees, are they really going to be putting themselves in that position again just to have the same issues where they kind of need to try to cut corners, look out in some favorable trades for salary dumps and other things, and hope that their in-house talent blossoms enough to give you depth with Jason Dominguez, Spencer Jones, who's on the come up for them, among others? Whereas the Mets, what they have, which is very interesting, is not only the ability to sell on their dollars, that they can get more than anyone else. They don't have the caliber. They don't have necessarily the market value to the same degree as the Yankees, which is been their point of emphasis. They've said, they really reiterate who they were. Soto knows very much who they are, getting the whole experience and then some this past year as a superstar there. So no one understands it better in a short period of time than Juan. But the fact that they really need to reaffirm that and kind of make Soto feel better about certain things, I think stands out to me. Why do you need to make Soto feel better about the current situation that he's in? That alone is a sell job where I think it benefits the Mets here. And then you add in Steve Cohen and the infrastructure, right? This is the first time ever since not only Cohen became owner, but really in a number of years under the Wilpons, where you have sustainability from the front office down, where you know David Stearns will be here 5 years from now. You know Carlos Mendoza will more than likely be here 5 years from now. Is Aaron Boone going to be in the Bronx a year from now if the Yankees fall short and maybe don't even get close to the World Series? Is Brian Cashman going to be here 2 years from now when there's been a lot of question marks with his uncertain future, as he may go for, say, a lateral move elsewhere outside the organization? So with that lack of sustainability, along with what the priorities are for the Yankees, which is very much so on why they are the New York Yankees, why you should be here because of our public perception, I think the Yankees care just as much about keeping Juan Soto as they do about making sure that they don't lose him for that public perception. The Mets have nothing to lose, only to gain in this circumstance. And what they can sell, and what Juan Soto has also said, is the point of emphasis on the farm. What is your farm looking like? How's your player development? How's that going to look years going forward? The Mets have a very strong farm right now, right up there, one of the better ones in Major League Baseball, and it's continuing to get better each and every year. There's pretty much no lack of confidence in the Mets' ability to continue to look at 2024 and build off that for better, for sustained winning. Whereas the Yankees, they got all the way to the dance somehow, but they would, one, have never gone that if they were in the National League, with how much steeper it was, and two, the fundamental baseball. That drastically needs to change for them should they have themselves a step forward in 2025. And then you're adding in all the other idiosyncrasies from the rotation, the bullpen, what have you. So after examining all that information, Dexter, what's your thoughts on the latest with Soto and the Yankees versus the Mets in this pursuit?
I love that you put all that out there because I think so much of it explained very well the difference between the Yankees and the Mets and where they are right now, right? As somebody who does a lot of content covering both of these teams, not as closely as a beat reporter, but does that. The biggest question I had coming into this offseason surrounding the Soto situation was a question that I have for the Yankees that I do not have for the Mets is how bad do you want it? What's the want to? How bad do you want to win? You mentioned the point of since the $300 million tax threshold that Hal Steinbrenner has not shown the willingness to want to. I haven't seen it. However, here's the game changer. This is the first time, and taking Aaron Judge out of it, who's a tremendous player, this is the first time they've had younger, in his prime, generational talent that they were able to acquire.
Right.
But when you look at the fact that we're even questioning that in the year 2024 about the New York Yankees, who arguably is one of the strongest brands in sports history in the world, okay? That is their brand is strong, but brands can change, folks. Brands are not always what they used to be. And I'm not even going to go that far ago. I was going to say 20, 25 years ago, but let's just say 15 years ago, 13, 15 years ago. This would have been a no-brainer. Yankees are not thinking about this. Yankees are going to lock this up. There wouldn't even be competition. We also know it's a new day. The Dodgers have money. The Mets have money. The Yankees have not shown the willingness to want to win that badly. That's where I think the Mets do have a slight edge. The Mets have the want to in Steve Cohen, in an owner who is a Mets fan, who wants to bring a title to this fan base and wants to do it. But want to is not enough, guys. And I think you saw it in the way the Mets approached last offseason. And you and I have talked about this, Wardy. You were all in and you got to a point where it's like, all right, I like them going for Yamamoto. What David Stearns has shown you is Cohen does have to want to with the checkbook. Because see, how they approached last season tells me a lot about this offseason.
Right.
They've got the want to with the checkbook, but they're not only going to break the bank for in their prime generational talent, which to me is smart. This is how you do it.
Right.
And the Mets have shown the year before that, before last offseason, right? They decided to sell, which I always thought was the right move. They saw what these sunk costs were. They were going to do it. They needed to build up the farm system. Another point that you mentioned. I think that is also an advantage for the Mets. The problem for the Yankees, people will say, well, the Yankees have some young players. They've got Jason Dominguez. They have the second baseman that's coming up on the way. His name is escaping me right now.
For the Yankees?
Yes, coming up for the Yankees.
Yeah. No, they have multiple not only infield but outfield prospects that are like right at the cusp.
Right at the cusp, right? Yeah. The problem for them is recent history tells you that they've had some prospects come up and they haven't hit, right? I mean like hit on them, right? Like They haven't hit on these prospects, and they have not necessarily been guys that made it in the major leagues and have been really successful. You can say Anthony Volpe's turned into he looks like he's going to be a fine player. That's really it. They outside of Judge, they haven't really hit on any that well.
Yeah.
Not saying that the Mets have this tremendous track record of doing that, because they don't. But I think recently what they can show you is they have the want to, and they're not afraid to make moves. I think another thing that's underrated in this, Wardy, when you look at what happened with third base with the Mets this past year, when you look at the fact that another team might have said, oh, we brought up Brett Beatty, let's stick with him. Let's ride this out. No, Vientos was hitting better. The Mets have this culture with Mendoza and Stearns right now that's, if you're not performing, we're going to keep this thing moving because we're trying to win. I think that part matters a ton. I think what the Mets have shown with their culture in trying to win and what they're willing to do to win, not just spend, it's develop, it's hold people accountable, right? It's go with the best 25 to 26 players for the roster that is going to work. And I think that's their selling point. And I think the other thing you would think about if you're Juan Soto, let's say 4 years from now, and I hate going this far in the future because we don't even know if that's going to come or we're going to be here, we're going to see any of this. But let's say another generational talent comes up. that the Mets could get in on. One thing I know about Steve Cohen and Dave Stearns is they have the want to win right now. They talked about wanting to have a Dodgers-like system. That's the team you're trying to beat, obviously, right now is the World Series champions. I don't know that with the Yankees. When have they shown you the want to win recently? And it sounds weird for me to say that about the Yankees. However, what I think we're getting at, Wardy, at this point of baseball free agency is the Yankees can no longer just live off their brand. Everybody's
Thank you. Yes.
You can't. Think about it. Everybody's saying the brand is strong and the name is strong. I'm not saying that it isn't. I'm not doubting that one bit. The Yankees are still the Yankees. The Pinstripes are still the Pinstripes. They got the most championships in Major League Baseball history, all that stuff. But I saw this happen in basketball with the Knicks, and Kevin Durant said this a couple of years ago about the Knicks, said the Knicks weren't cool anymore. He's right. Knicks weren't cool at the time because you had a whole generation of people that have grown up, like Juan Soto. He's 26 years old. The last time the Yankees won, he was 11. The brand does not mean the same thing to him that it did to somebody years ago. So what you've done for me lately matters. Now, the one thing I'll throw in here, and then I'll let you get to it. The thing with the Yankees, when it comes to that want to, how much of this they know is going to hurt their business if they lose Juan Soto? And that's where I'm wondering with Hal Steinbrenner, do you really understand that this will impact business for you? Because I think if they lose him, I do think there's ramifications for the Yankees because that signals to everybody, truly, it's really a new time in baseball. Their brand is not what it used to be, right? There'll be some fans in the Bronx that are not going to maybe show up, not want to renew their season tickets because they don't feel that commitment to winning. They might have all that. It can have an impact on them business-wise. I do, whether it goes either way. If they bring him in, if they bring him back, it's fantastic for them business-wise. And it looks like the brand is strong. If they don't, especially if they lose him to the Mets, which I know all the Mets fans are smiling about because they want this to happen. I understand why. If they lose him to the Mets, it truly shows them it's a big loss for them. Yeah. It truly shows that the brand isn't strong. So I think how much they A, want to win, how much they B, want to keep the brand strong, and how much C, they understand the business impact of Juan Soto will be shown by the numbers that come out in terms of what the Yankees offer. What the Yankees offer Juan Soto and how far they're willing to go is going to tell a lot in this whole situation.
Oh, it is, especially when we go back to the Yamamoto sweepstakes. That is where I think it's valid to throw at least a sliver of comparison for the sake of many deemed, and widespread in the media, and you know this because that's when I was reporting a lot of it leading up to his decision, that the Yankees looked like a longtime favorite that, oh my goodness, he's prioritizing pinstripes. They're saving number 18, the ace number for him. All they rolling out the red carpet, bang, bang, boom, what have you. And they don't even go past like $300 million. They're like over 20 mil short of what the Mets and the Dodgers ultimately had there and Yamamoto's decision. So they wanted him, but they knew that they're the Yankees. So at the end of the day, we want you, but we know that you have to want to be here, so much so that it needs to reflect in how this negotiation goes. Juan Soto, his entire career has been what? Say it with me, Dexter. A me guy, a big me guy. He's been it from the start. Literally, how can you not be when you're a superstar as a teenager, winning a World Series right away to kickstart your career? Bryce Harper's replacement, no problem. I mean, there's no better way to impact the league as immediate as Soto did. And then on top of it, he's already won a World Series, and now he just lost one where he was anything but the reason as to why with the same Yankees. So that, I think, even with the run that they had, there's just, I think a lot of things just fall in place where you can look back, should the Mets be the top bidder in the end and actually win the sweepstakes here? These are so many factors as to why. And the brand, the emphasis is so important because, yes, you are 1,000% right. Brand perception is huge. It's still used today, but it doesn't carry the same amount of weight. And the Yankees, we continue to learn that over the years, but instead, Yankee fans have pushed it aside and said, oh, Steinbrenner is just stubborn. He isn't willing. You know, stubbornness is part of it, but it goes in hand because of what Hal is wired to know on how much our organization is perceived across Major League Baseball. We're usually the big bad not Dodgers, the Yankees. We view ourselves as the evil empire, right? That's how the league is supposed to perceive us. But it's hard to view an evil empire that hasn't done anything all that evil and winning a championship in well over a decade now. So now they find themselves in a predicament where they're really in this kind of this gray area on and what is best for them in the future of their organization. And that is where a Mets team that's vibrant, that certainly is not going to suppress you from being your true personal self. That's another thing as well. When you're a Yankee, again, no facial hair, not that Juan can grow out a beard comfortably, because I really don't think he can right now. But all I'm saying is those little things go a long way. So when it comes to, okay, you need to be this conformist. You have to be it the Yankee way. That's how it needs to be. Whereas if you go to the Mets, you're still New York. You get the same exact environment. However, you can play freely. You can actually you can breathe. Even with the media, it's a different handle.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to throw something back at you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up about the facial hair and all that stuff, because I've had this conversation with some Yankee content creators. People, I think that matters a little bit more today than people realize.
Yes.
I love that you brought it up, because I think it does matter, right? Like, I'm not sure. One, I'll be blunt. This is probably the first time I've said this publicly, but I think the rule is stupid. I think it's outdated.
Oh, snap. He's canceled.
Yeah, but it's fine. I think it's stupid. I just think it's an old school mentality, and I think players should be allowed to express themselves how they want. This is baseball. They're playing baseball. There's no proof that any of that translates to winning. Clearly, It hasn't in the last 15 years. Clearly. So I wonder if players look at those situations and it's like, I can't be myself here. Like, I have to do this Yankee way. And what does that mean? And how does that translate to winning? I don't think that matters. I don't know if the Yankees will ever abandon that. But I guess what I wanted to throw at you that I'm curious is, do you think that could be a real sticking point for Soto as somebody who's been in the pinstripes, been around that culture, and is like, it might even just be about the facial hair. It just might be more about, I don't know, just wanting to be a little freer. Do you think that matters for him?
I think it matters in the sense because Yankees are really trying to perpetuate how important their marketability is and how much Soto can gain financially, not only on the contract, but on the sponsors that come with. Please enlighten me how Soto wouldn't be unbelievably marketable, so much so that he would drastically change the dynamic of New York sports before our very eyes if he landed with the Mets. Because it's not like the Mets don't get, media publicity. I mean, listen, like seriously, they're in there every single year, even when there isn't a lot to talk about usually. So just imagine what it would be now to the pedestal of, oh my God, this is a perennial contender for the next 5-10 years. You're telling me that Soto, right in the core peak of his career right now, at the young age of 26, wants to be here long term. I think that there's something to be said about how his impact can be had from a personality perspective, on how it differentiates from being more your white collar self with the New York Yankees, whereas being able to be blue collar and being able to be, again, more personal in a way that you just can't get while being a Yankee. Yes, you get the prestige. You get an amazing fan base constantly. And that's the first time and only time you're going to hear me gas up Yankee fans. You have a lot of things that go in their favor based on history alone, their continued push for continued success, and to trying to win. And even when the Yankees don't win, they're usually still a good team every year. That's what's been able to separate the two. Whereas us Mets fans, no one's complaining after falling shy of a World Series run when, one, we didn't have that expectation heading into the season, and two, we also know that our playoff runs have been so few and far in between that it hits home for us. It means more. And I think the aspect of things meaning more and things being more personal from player to player, fan to fan, is furthermore on top of the $700+ million, which is what Soto will be actively weighing throughout these sweeps. It just makes too much sense because, again, if he wants to market himself, he can market himself plenty with the Yankees, but he's still going to have Judge's shadow. He's not going to have the shadow to the same degree with Lindor.
That's another good point.
That's another good point. Because Lindor is our unsung captain, but he is not the best overall player on the team. Like, defensively, he's tremendous. We all know this. But when looking at a pure generational hitter, while Lindor will most certainly be in the Hall, God willing, by the time he retires, Juan Soto's already a lock at the age of 26. Like, there's a difference already. You know what I mean? And just this 5-6 year span, however long he's been in the league now, it has been ginormous in his value. And one thing I definitely want to throw at you before we get on to our closing remarks here on the Juan Soto sweepstakes right now, and then we'll touch a bit on the starting pitching market and your further thoughts on the Mets before we get out of here and answer some comments, is the following. This is a Mets team that has been going, beyond bananas for Juan Soto that we are well aware of. But we also know that when it comes to Soto and the comfortability being here, that this also has a lot to do with how the team is willing to work around him. I think there's also a comfortability in the sense that the Mets would be willing to do more to meet Juan Soto's needs on the day-by-day with what he personally wants, as well as to how they can perpetuate him market-wise. Whereas the Yankees, they're going to continue to have a hard line in the sand. It's going to be a certain way, and it's going to be a way that, again, still separates themselves from the Mets. Some may say it's a good thing, some may say it's bad. All I know is the Mets have had far from problems when it comes to marketing since Steve Cohen has become owner, and Francisco Lindor has been at the forefront of that. So, yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling cautiously optimistic as a Mets fan about this entire thing right now, and I'm dying to find out the actual results of this, like us all at this point, because it drags,
Yeah.
and I hope it doesn't drag beyond the winter meetings.
I hope it doesn't too. Sadly, I have a feeling that it is. I hope it doesn't, but I have a feeling that it is. No, I think you should feel good, Wardy. I think Mets. Listen, what I'll say about this with Soto is I think Mets fans should feel good that they have ownership that is in the mix, and it is very clear that they have the want to win. That doesn't mean you land every free agent. That doesn't mean you get everything you want. But I think knowing that ownership wants to win, and there's also a president of baseball operations in David Stearns who can find value on the margins and has shown that he can do that.
Yep.
I think is really good and really encouraging for the Mets. I think, like I said, Soto or not, I think Mets fans should be encouraged about 2025. I agree with you. Is there pressure, a different pressure on the Mets in 2025, no matter what happens this offseason? Absolutely. But here's the thing. You got to welcome that pressure. You got to welcome the expectations. Right. Nobody wants to be, and no shade to any other teams. You don't want to be the Oakland A's. You don't want to be, the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's no expectations there, right? Or they're very low. You want the bar to get raised, and you want to see if the players can, reach that bar and exceed that bar. That is why we watch sports. This is why we love teams. This is part of it. And I think all you ever want is your ownership and front office to give you a chance, the best chance possible to win. And look, maybe it's Soto, maybe it's somebody else down the road. Steve Cohen's and company are going to close on one of these big-time free agents. It's going to happen because I do think they're building the right way. It's just a matter of when and who's the right fit. But I think they will get big-time names who want to be here, that want to play in Flushing, and I think it'll be fine.
I think it'll be fine too. I think the Mets will make more, not lateral moves, but nothing overly crazy if they don't land Soto. And the reason why I say that is for the same exact reason why they didn't go bananas for, say, Blake Snell last offseason, even after they lost down Yamamoto, is because they were looking for guys that fit a certain profile. Soto is the only guy in the market that fits a short and long-term profile at an elite rate, unlike anyone else. So there is no proper pivot if you don't land Juan Soto. Your pivot is, okay, what do you want to do differently then? Because the current free agents out there in the marketing, Teoscar Hernandez, Anthony Santander, these guys can play corner outfield / DH. Their guys are big home run bats that would give you immediate help right away. However, there will be natural concern on the longevity of a contract for either of the two, which is why it seemed like the Mets will be more reluctant than anything to go out of their way, because they've already learned the hard way with Starling Marte. 80 plus million over 4 years, how quickly that can backfire, especially if a guy is deteriorating in health, age, things of that nature. So I think they're going to be very sparing. Even though they have a lot of money to spend, I think they're going to be very aggressive in the trade market as well, especially if they don't land Soto. I think that there's a greater route potentially elsewhere in the trade market to try to land a premium bat who maybe still has a couple years left of control in his contract that the Mets can allocate proper prospects for, knowing that they're getting both short and long-term help. Whereas if, say, they invest in just the next best offensive free agent, and it's, say, Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander, then bam, maybe next year's free agency has better, younger, more vibrant options in those areas that if you just waited a year, things would have went better in your favor. And I understand the counter of, okay, you can't wait a year from now when you got to focus on what's ahead. Doesn't mean you can't still have success. Again, the Mets moved laterally this past offseason and went 2 games shy of the dance, not for lack of effort. The LA Dodgers moved laterally 2 years ago, which is why they allowed Trey Turner to walk, because they knew that they were going bananas for Ohtani and Yamamoto a year later. They went scorched earth for them. They spent $1.2 billion. They won a championship in year 1. Further reason as to why I think Steve Cohen just has so much fuel to fire, because he sees that. He sees exactly how it worked for the Dodgers, the way that he was kind of trying to get it to work right away for the Mets, and to see the differences between the two. But rest assured, I think the Mets are in great hands. And a final cap I'll say on this regarding Juan Soto, so we can pivot into some other players and get closer to wrapping up our discussion is, listen, when it comes to Soto and the player pursuits right now, in the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Dodgers, they all bring different varying aspects to make themselves appealing, which is why, at the end of the day, if Soto lands with any of those 5 reported teams, no one should be like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. There is a level of reasoning for each and every one. But as we highlighted over this past hour or so, the reasons as to why the Mets stick out are so great for a multitude of them, same as the Yankees, whereas the Blue Jays, their main appeal is they have dollars to spend, but their farm has went lateral at best. They have really taken steps back after trying to move forward in the free agent market past couple years. And unfortunately, there's just that natural barrier knowing that they're in Canada that really deters a lot of players, especially on long-term contracts, because just the differences and how they handle their day-to-day living. You know, it's an different environment there for them too, living half the year in Toronto. So you have that aspect of Toronto where you have uncertainty on the GM and managerial front, which is why, for reasons separate than that as well, I don't see Soto going there. The Red Sox have been stubborn to spend in recent years, and now one act scorched earth out of nowhere. They're letting it all out. They're telling all rival executives, we're going to spend big time this offseason. We're letting at least one big-time starter, if not 2. We're pushing hard for Juan Soto. We want him to know that we want him here and everything in between. But, you know, that's a lot of talk. Are they going to actually back it up? We have yet to see that from Henry. Not that he hasn't been able to spend in the past, but it's been a number of years. You know, they've let that entire 2018 World Series team run falter short, and they didn't really do any proper adjustment. They move laterally at best throughout the year. So the Dodgers, they're the Dodgers. They just won the World Series. They want to do this Kevin Durant Warriors situation. They can certainly do that. But one, no one wants that for the game of baseball. And 2, this isn't a priority for them because they don't need it to be a priority. They just showed why they don't need to prioritize someone like Soto. They can run it back next year. Oh, yeah, Ohtani's going to pitch now in 2025. I don't know if you guys remember that he throws a baseball, too. He's really good at it. Yeah, they're going to be perfectly fine, you know, even if they do nothing this offseason, the Dodgers, for the most part. So that's all I got to say about Soto, my man. So let's pivot now into some other players. But before I do, I want to shout out the north of 700 live concurrent viewers we've had on YouTube today. Appreciate you guys watching live on a replay. If you guys don't know my man Dexter Henry, please make sure to check him out on X, and I believe that is D Henry TV. Give him a follow, and you can check out his weekly segments there with SNY the New York Post for some New York sports segments that he does every single week there. Great job as always. And we do have some donations from Henrik with a $10 donation. Says, is Boris using the Mets to push Hal to give an offer where Soto will just end up back to the Yankees? I don't think using is the right word. However, I do think it's accurate that naturally the Mets are raising the price to the highest magnitude. So whether it's being a used version because, say, Soto has zero interest in coming to the Mets and we don't know about it right now, okay, then that would be using. But I don't think that's the case. I think that this is as simple as the Mets we know are essentially going to be the highest bidder. So if the Yankees are going to land Soto, they're probably going to need to do things that they've never done before. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I also think that this season, I call this in all sports, right? This part of the time, this time in this free agency, and it's a lot of lying you'll hear in this, right? It's a lot of posturing, and agents are going to set things up. I think you also have to watch, fans should watch the order of the meetings, how those get set up, how this news comes out, who's telling it, who wants it to be out. If you're Scott Boras, you want as much news around 6-7 teams as possible because it raises the interest. I did find it interesting that the Mets were the first team to meet with Soto. I thought that was interesting considering we know that probably out of all the players, taking the Dodgers out of it and knowing they don't probably have the willingness to really go all in for Soto, the Mets have the most money, right? To your point that you're saying there, they're not being used. It's just everybody knows this, and they can kind of help set the market in a way for what offers should be for him. Right. If they come in at a high standard, then everybody knows that, and that might get some of the pretenders, I'll say, out the way. I don't think the Mets are being used. I think the Mets are a viable player here. Now, if anything, it's just the game is what the game is. The Mets could affect how far the Yankees will go. Look, with Yamamoto, Cohen went all the way. He went
as far
all
as
the
he
way.
could go. Yeah,
He
literally.
went all in. Like, this was not for a lack of effort, guys. This was just, he chose the Dodgers. It had nothing. It wasn't money. It wasn't that Cohen couldn't get it done. And I have to have the feeling and belief that if you're a Mets fan, why would you not think that the same thing's going to happen here? Because I don't see any reason that the Mets won't be the highest bidder. If the Mets lose this, it's not going to be because of money.
No,
and if
it's going
that's
to be because of everything else.
It's going to be because of everything else. And if that's what happens and Soto chooses elsewhere, it's fine.
So
I think to the point you brought up before, Wardy, I think if a play like the Red Sox, like, I'm with you. I don't necessarily buy the Blue Jays in this. Like, I think they want to be, but I'm not sure they are really in it. I think the Red Sox want to be in this. Right. I understand why you have trepidation in the fact that we haven't seen them do anything really in like 6 years. So I get that there, but I do think the Red Sox, I found them interesting in this. I will say that. Like, here's the thing we know about the Red Sox. They haven't shown the want to really in like 6 years, but they always want to beat the Yankees.
They always want to beat the Yankees. That's true.
And if there's a chance to take away somebody the Yankees had, like the Mets fans can understand on this, yeah, they want to. And this is the thing, that's why the Yankees thing is so interesting, guys. How bad do they want this? How bad do they want to build? You use the term evil empire around them that everybody's had. How bad do they want to get back to that? That's what's fascinating here, because I think the Mets want to. I do believe the Red Sox want to. And I think if the Dodgers, I would not sleep on them either.
Can never sleep on them. Pains in the ass.
You can't sleep on them, because if they really want to and they don't, I hear you. Most baseball fans don't want to see this, but if they really want to, they're going to show it. I am not sleeping on the Dodgers, sir. I am not doing that at all whatsoever. I wouldn't do that. I think this really, if you ask me honestly, I think this really does come down to the Yankees and the Mets, but I wouldn't sleep on the Dodgers and I wouldn't sleep on the Red Sox.
Yeah, Red Sox are interesting in the sense that while they haven't spent in recent years, they do have an owner that definitely can and is willing to spend. Now, he doesn't touch Cohen in like true monetary value. And if we're really going tit for tat, like if we're going back and forth, again, we know how this is going to end. The Mets will be 99% the top dog unless they change their course because they find out through Soto's camp that, okay, there isn't as much interest here as they initially thought. Like, things fall through, which happens in negotiation that some people forget to understand. But the Red Sox, what really stands out to me is not only their ability to win, but it's also their ability, how you emphasized how, you know, how much of a negative impact it'll be if the Yankees lose Soto to the Mets from a public perception, a market perception, everything in between. For the same applies to the Red Sox, which they know very well. They know how much that they would get marketing-wise should they bring him in. They also know that this would essentially be a reverse role of, Babe Ruth. Let's just be frank. Like, when we talk about top talents, as good as Juan Soto, there really aren't many others that hit the dome from an offensive standpoint that were both a Yankee and a Red Sox, you know, going all the way back to even then. It's insane to fathom, but we fast forward all this time later, and Juan Soto is deemed by many as a generational hitter, a generational talent. So are the Yankees really willing? Are they going to be able to allow that supreme of a talent to walk? When it's not even like it was a Robinson Cano situation where Robinson Cano, when he left the Yankees, he was already at that point, you know, in the prime of his career, getting towards the end of his prime, which is why the Mariners locked down that contract initially, $240 million, that us Mets had to eat for the final remaining years, because that's what happens when you hire, I don't know, the guy's agent to be our GM. Wow, who would have thought, right? Same way that no one talks enough how the Angels GM is the former GM of the Braves, which is why every single offseason, former Atlanta Braves are signed to the Angels and they're traded around the deadline. Literally, I'm telling you, it's like a laundry thing. There's something really bad going on between the Halos and the Braves. I won't expand on further, but
it's not working out for the Halos. But yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, it is absolutely bananas. But okay, we expanded enough on there. So let's get into pitching, Dexter. I'm really curious as to where you stand from a fan perspective when looking at the markets for both the Mets and the Yankees here, because the Yankees, we know they're going to be adding to their rotation, especially after seeing how little they have outside of Garrett Cole and Luis Gil on their right, because Carlos Rodon has been aging like milk signing for them, unfortunately. They have not gotten consistency whatsoever. They really lack depth in that rotation. The Mets, they lack depth just because all of our guys are free agents now. We have Kodai Senga, we have David Pearson, and we have Brandon Sproat, who we do expect to impact the rotation as soon as next year. He's a top prospect for us. But outside that, you have Tyler McGill, Paul Blackburn. Like, that's it. Guys that you really don't even want to touch your rotation if they don't need to. So it's Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, Luis Severino in the market right now. And then when you look at the upper echelon pitchers and Corbin Burnes, Max Fried, Blake Snell, then to a degree, Walker Buehler, among the others of the former Mets that we mentioned. Out of those starters, what stand out the most to you to potentially land in Queens and why? I'm really curious.
I think the Mets will have, depends, really a lot depends on what happens with Soto, and then I would also add Alonso. But I think they got a good shot with Corbin Burnes. He's a guy I think would be fit great for the Mets and what they want. I think if the Mets, in terms of rebuilding the pitching rotation, if they get a Corbin Burnes and they can bring back Manaea on like a 3-year deal, I think that's a good offseason for them in terms of what they need to do with the pitching.
Oh, yeah.
Blake Snell, I'd stay away from.
This is where we're gonna have a nice little debate. I like this.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of his. Did you want the Mets to go after him last offseason?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I know how talented he is, like his ceiling is Cy Young. But no, in the sense I had reservations because last offseason, unlike this year, he was tagged to the qualifying offer. So if the Mets sign him, they would have give up a draft compensation pick.
Right.
They don't have to worry about that this offseason, which is why I find him more appealing.
That's a fair point, and I can see why they're more appealing. He just here. I guess with me, it's like what are you paying him, right? Like what's the market for him? I don't want to. I do. He's a tier below to me. Corbin Burnes and Max Fried. I would say those are the top 2 pitchers on the market. We'd agree on that, right?
I think for like what they're. I think for age upside, yeah, I would make an argument between Fried and Snell depending on what you're looking for. But from a consistency standpoint, Max Fried is one of the most consistent stars in the game.
I agree, and it's why I would go with him over Snell too.
Right
now, if they landed Fried and then get Burnes, that's fine. I think if they can get 2 good arms back, I'm assuming. I think Manaea will be back with the Mets. I have no inside information, so please do not quote me on
Breaking news, Dexter Henry of SNY.
No, we don't want that. Please, no. I think Manaea will be back. I think he'll get something like a 3-year deal. I think his age, they're going to try to push for 4. Maybe it'll be 3 with a team option. I could see something like that for Manaea. And I think Manaea is fine right at the age he is to give him that kind of deal where the Mets could be okay with that. And I liked how he was willing to adjust things with his pitching this year. So I think his pitching ability over the next 3 to 4 years could be fine. But Burnes, you get Burnes and you get Senga back healthy. Now you have Manaea. I think now you're looking at a top 3 that's really good. That I feel really good about. Or I'll say you can add Fried in that too, and I feel really good about that. I actually do think it's really imperative, no matter what the Mets do on the offensive side of the ball in terms of position players, I think it's really imperative they land themselves another top starter. And understand there's going to be, pitching is always at a premium. There are going to be other teams out there. You just mentioned the Yankees. They need another starting pitching. They're looking to try to trade off Marcus Stroman. You talked about that. That's been reported. They're also, probably looking to, move on from Rodon. They're not going to be able to do that, but I think they're going to look to, try to bolster that rotation. So there's going to be competition out there. But yeah, if it was me, Corbin Burnes would be top of my list. I think he fits brilliantly with the Mets. He slots right into the rotation. It takes pressure off of Senga, especially coming back with a year where he's going to have to try to prove that he's healthy. I think you need somebody to take the pressure off, and I think it takes pressure off Manaea too. He's a good 3 starter. That's a perfect spot for him. And then you see how you fill out with the rest of the rotation. But, I think if you're the Mets, you don't listen, no shade. You don't want to see too much Tyler McGill next year. That's not what you want. If you're seeing that, it's a problem with the rotation. It's a problem.
I agree. And there are things I agree with on Corbin Burnes and things I disagree with. Nothing on what you said, but where I stand with Burnes. So a brief on the pros and the cons. Pros to Corbin Burnes, lasting relationship with David Stearns, right? He helped propel his entire career during their time in Milwaukee. So they already have a good rapport with each other. To what degree, I don't know. But what I've heard throughout the industry is that it's been at least positive. Secondly, you're landing a surefire ace to pair with Kodai Senga on your rotation for a guy that has had Cy Young votes the past number of years. And while Corbin Burnes, the big question and bugaboo with him has been his fairly steady decline of strikeouts per 9, going from over 10K per 9 to right around 8K per 9 this past year, where he's heavily relying on having pinpoint accuracy and not walking guys to make sure that there's a strong K to walk ratio. And the reason why that in particular is important is if, say, you have a guy striking out someone at, let's say, 7 strikeouts per 9 innings, but if he's walking guys at north of 4 walks, so for only a 3 differential, you're really not getting the turnout that you're hoping or looking for, because you're not getting dominant stuff to help compensate at least for the lack of control that they have in the zone. In the case of Burns, he has been very, very much on the control front without a problem, but the Ks have fluctuated even for a guy that we know has steadily been as consistent as he's been in his career. So for Corbin Burns, there's 2 major flaws as to why I could see the Mets not landing him, and then there's 2 major factors as to why I could see them landing him. And the flaws are, 1, it's the contract stipulation. So 1, I do believe he's connected to a qualifying offer, which he rejected, which means that the Mets would have to give up a compensation pick to land him. That right there is something that's going to deter them a little bit, because we want to focus on drafting player development as much as possible, and the Mets have a confidence in their pitching lab that they built the past couple years to a higher magnitude than ever before, so much so that they're more willing to try some guys on shorter term contracts. And that contract length is the big bugaboo for Corbin Burns, because he's going to want right around a 7-year contract of over $200 million. Understandably
I'm going to cut you off. That's the one problem for me.
Right.
And I'm skeptical based on what we've seen in baseball, right? And I would say the last 7, I'm nervous about these 7-year deals, man.
Me too. I think the Mets are as well.
especially what you said about a little bit of a strikeout rate going down and the walk rate going up a little bit over the last couple of years. That does concern me as he gets older and giving somebody a 7-year deal. 5, a little more comfortable with that. Right. 7, I don't know. Can I throw another pitcher out there that we didn't talk about?
Oh, of course. Yeah, go ahead.
How about Sasaki?
He's fascinating.
So I like going the international route. I like going the young international route if you can. If I was the Mets, I would be aggressive on that.
Very much so. What we know to this point is that the Mets, they've already flown to Japan back in September. Stearns met with Sasaki, so they've had that connection for a number of months at minimum that we know publicly. Roki has been long believed to be basically a shoo-in for the Dodgers until proven otherwise. But if that isn't the case, and there are other factors that go into play, especially about building your own market, your own media perception where you're not overshadowed, that is where the Mets have a much greater opportunity here to pounce versus a team like the Dodgers, where he's behind 2 fellow countrymen that are the best in the game, and Ohtani Yamamoto. So right there, he will be overshadowed his entire time there. That's excluding Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and everyone else in that lineup. Right. Versus the Mets, he would be able to pair with Kodai Senga, a fellow countryman that can help him get adjusted and acclimated at the major league level. The Mets have a great understanding on how to handle pitchers like him to transition smoothly to Major League Baseball, like they did with Senga, making him a Cy Young caliber pitcher in his first year here, meaning that they expanded on the rotation front. They went to a 6-man for a decent period of time, and then they went down to a 5-man after he got comfortable after amount of starts. Sasaki does have wear and tear as a now turned 23-year-old when it comes to just so much velocity behind that arm where TJ is inevitable, but that's something that the teams are willing to buy in on, knowing how young he is and how unique of his circumstances. At least 2 years younger than Yamamoto makes this very different, and that's the dollars as well, which is why I don't see the Mets laying Sasaki, just because they can't throw a massive bag far greater than anyone else. The most a team can offer for Sasaki's services is $7 million based on the international bonus pool money that every team works with around January 15th, getting into 2025. So when that signing period begins, everyone's restocked, but a lot of teams are still committed to other players for that 2025 IFA class that they are now going to say, I'm sorry, I'm not committing to you anymore because I'm going to focus my attention elsewhere. To a more of a surefire guaranteed thing than Roki Sasaki. So there's a bit too much of a hurdle, in my opinion, for the Mets to land Sasaki in the end, but the interest is already there. Like that's evident. That would be
and
there.
I love that I love that. Sorry to cut you off. I love that the interest is there because everything you said about the age and this is where I think you could fit. Granted, a lot of, like you said, a lot of miles behind the hard throwing on that young arm. But I think it's that the fact that you're waiting on January 15th, January 16th date before they can do anything in terms of making them an offer, and it'll be limited in that. I think that, and they have other needs before that. This is also some of my squabbles or problems with baseball free agency, right? And where this stuff is kind of frustrating because there's an exciting young talent coming from Japan. You want to do it. You're right. You make great points. The Mets should have the edge, because of what we don't know with Roki is how does he feel about being third in the, I hate to put it like this, but in the Japanese superstar pecking order on the Dodgers.
Yeah, just on his team alone, which is
on his
insane.
team alone, right? Yeah, nobody's going to be nobody in baseball is really going to pass Shohei Ohtani.
No.
And then you got Yamamoto. So it's interesting, but it's the reason I mentioned him is only because the Mets have shown, we saw this with Yamamoto, we see this in talking about with Soto. Can you get really good talent that's young that could be part of your immediate and future plans? It feels like the kind of pitcher you'd want. Like almost I'd rather them put money into him than into Burns. And if that was a move like that, but the problem is there's too much risk in letting that play out by the time you get to January 16th. That's the issue with it there.
Yes.
I could say wait on pitchers, that, but there's a lot of risk. Yeah.
There's a lot of risk, and there's a lot of question marks as to how quickly are the dominoes going to fall here in the starting pitching market, given that's already started with Yusei Kikuchi going to the Angels. That's a very Angels thing to do, is to make an early splash in the offseason, kind of no one expected. That's just how they do it every single year. So I don't think the floodgates just open now all of a sudden, but I do think that we will see some traction potentially before Soto makes his decision. And from there, you just have to assume that traction will still probably be more on the middle level of starters, and guys like Corbin Burns, especially Blake Snell to a degree, just because of how enticing he is as a shorter term, higher average annual value of a fit per year on your contract. Those guys are probably not going to fall until after Soto decides. So yeah, we're still waiting in the wings, similar to Ohtani last offseason, but to varying degrees. And okay, you need this big fish to fall, then everything else can kind of settle, because again, if Soto goes here, a team might be more inclined to spend their money elsewhere. Not that that's necessarily the proper mindset to have, but speaking of the Angels, they famously for endless years on end have done this fantastic thing, which is, okay, we need to prioritize the rotation. Wow, we struck out on all these starters. Okay, so let's go and land a free agent on the offensive end to help compensate for the lack of pitching. That's not how that works. That is why they signed this man by the name of Anthony Rendon a number of years ago from the Washington Nationals. At the time, a massive contract, when the reality was their ownership forced them to do that because Billy Epler was known as the GM at the time for this. His hands were tied after losing out on Zach Wheeler and Garrett Cole then to the New York Yankees.
Yes.
He wanted to hold off on spending for a year to allocate the dollars for the next year's free agent market for pitching. Instead, they spent however hundreds of millions that they did on Anthony Rendon, and he's went on to be literally the most disliked player in Major League Baseball since then. Just an example to not operate in that way. But how to operate is certainly by really hammering the margins, something that you emphasized well with David Stearns earlier. And that's where Blake Snell is honestly more appealing for this team than years past, and here's why. Blake Snell, even at the age of 31 now, yes, he walks a lot of guys. He still has a north of 4 walks per 9 this past season, but coming off of a career best 12 and a half strikeouts per 9 innings, the best in Major League Baseball. If you look at the guy's Baseball Savant page, which just gives you a nice thorough breakdown on players individually on all key statistics, he's in north of the 100th percentile, which is like the best of the best, and pretty much every stat not walks related, and that just shows you how elite not only his velocity is, his arsenal, his ability to not give up hard contact, everything in between. Simply put, Blake Snell, if he has an interest in coming to the East Coast, a part of this New York market in a big spotlight, which he's never been a part of before, Blake's personality doesn't strike me as the type at all. However, he might be willing if the dollars are there. An offseason ago, he was negotiating deep in talks to the Yankees, and they fell apart, and the Yankees ended up not making the deal for Snell. Then we fast forward a year later. I'm sure the Yankees will be involved there. I'm sure the Mets will too, because Snell, what he brings you is, even at a high AAV, it's a short-term contract from 2 to 4 years, which Steve Cohen will have no problem spending whatsoever, even if you have to eat maybe the last year and a half or so because he just doesn't grade out well after a couple of years for whatever reason. Snell is your biggest guarantee of a Cy Young caliber pitcher next year. I would even argue greater than Corbin Burns on a short-term value as well. That's really hard to come by, because
what kind of contract would you offer him if you were David Stearns? What are you offering him?
I would easily offer Blake Snell at least $30 million a year. Like, I think he's that good. I absolutely will.
How many years are you willing to go?
I think if I'm the Mets, you go a 3-year deal of at least 90 to 100 plus million with added incentives. There could be a vesting option as well, maybe after that second or third year. If you pitch this amount of innings, you're going to lock in for their contract. So just like how the Mets went about Justin Verlander at multiple years at 40 plus million average annual value, the same applied then, where if he pitched a certain amount of innings this past year, his contract would have opted in for the Mets for 1 more year for 2025. Praise the heavens, he did not opt into the contract.
I'm sure you are praising the heavens on that.
Yeah, he didn't pitch enough innings this past year for the Astros, so the Mets are are finally off the hook there. But that's an example on how that kind of contract would work. And yes, there's a lot of walks. That's a concern.
That's
But
my concern.
the big problem that people have is that Blake Snell's a 5-and-die pitcher. But he's actually not nearly as much as you think. And I want to shout out, I've said it in my video a couple days ago on Snell, and I'll say it once more. Shout out to James Shiano, good buddy of mine who has a Mets podcast as well. Huge pitching guy, loves his pitching. And James did a great breakdown how back in 2023, because we're going to exclude 2024 knowing that Snell started the season late with the Giants because he didn't sign until after spring training had begun. And, he needed a ramp up. The first month and a half, 2 months, he wasn't himself whatsoever. 2023 and his Cy Young Award-winning year and his final year with the Padres at 180 innings pitched, he had at least, what was it, 20 starts of 6 innings or more. Corbin Burns had 21 starts of 6 innings or more. Sandy Alcantara, who was widely known as this big innings eater throughout the years, also had 20 starts at 6 innings or more in 2023. So just to further show that, yes, we have a narrative with Snell because we have seen many outings where he only goes, say, 5 innings or so, walks a bunch, but strikes out 10, and you're like, holy shit, like it's insane. Like he's walking so many guys, but he's striking out everyone that he isn't allowing on base. But what we have seen over the past year is that he's actually found more success second and then third time in the order when facing batters. So Blake Snell is surprisingly getting better, even at this point in his career, which is further reason as to why I'm so hooked on him, because I think he just makes so much sense. The Mets don't have to invest long-term, win now stage. If he just can handle the big market and be here, I think he would do wonders. The same way I think Walker Buehler from the LA Dodgers, which a lot of people haven't talked about as much, shorter term contract, coming off of his first year from Tommy John surgery, didn't look great in the regular season, but dominating playoffs, closed it out.
Right.
Gorgeous job by him. Just won a championship as well, so he's looking for a bag on a short-term contract. Just like how the Mets went with Severino and Manaea a year ago, they can apply that the same with Walker Buehler a year later. And that is how the Mets are going to consistently churn out talent, by balancing signing ace-caliber starters while also going after guys that maybe on the forefront didn't have the best year, but we know that they're going to make major strides, and we know if we properly get them to adjust with our lab on a 1 or 2 year deal, they're going to far exceed their value. And that was the case of Manaea and Severino we saw this past year.
It wouldn't shock me if they went that way again too, right? Like I wouldn't mind if they got a Walker Buehler on a short-term deal. I don't think your deal for Snell is a bad one. The one you just mentioned, you said 3 years, $90 to $100 million, maybe even a little bit north of that with some incentives. I think that's pretty fair. My concern with Snell is the walks. And the other part you mentioned, does he want to be here, and can he pitch in this market? And guys that walk like that in this market, if things start to go bad, I could see him. I don't want to. He's more talented than this guy that I'm going to mention, but I think Mets fans will understand where I'm going with this, is that you don't want another Ali Perez situation, right? Where it's somebody who I think had a lot of talent, but then got themselves in trouble and was walking the ballpark, and the Mets fans are frustrated, and the rest was history.
I love Ali Perez just coming out of the blue, out of nowhere. That's a great one. Because you're right, especially with the Mets connection. He never lived up to it.
No, he never did. And even though I think Snell, again, I just to be clear, I think Snell is much more than Ali Perez. But I wonder about his ability to pitch in this market. And I do think you bring up a good point. I do think that the one thing I trust with this Mets front office and ownership is that I do think they're going to look for that stuff in the margins. And Walker Buehler might not be, he's not as sexy as a name as Snell and Burns and Fried. I think he's a tier below those guys for sure. But he could be a nice signing for what you said. He might want to get the bag in the short term and take a 3-year deal, but does he elevate the rotation? Yeah, he does. How would you feel if somehow it was just the Mets ended up with like Buehler and somehow they got Roki? How'd you feel about that as an offset?
Oh, I'd be pumped. I'd be
I would like that too.
Yeah,
I think that would be fine for the Mets.
No complaining at all, because even though that, yes, you're losing Manaea, Severino, and Quintana, what you're gaining, at least for one of the two, is a greater ceiling than anyone. And the other one, I think, is just a perfect bounce back candidate to further piggyback off of his playoff run and have himself a very respectable 2024. A guy that's definitely going to play better than, say, the 1-year contract or with a 2nd-year option will find himself signing. So I agree with you, especially if you paired Roki with Senga, David Peterson, and Walker Buehler as your 1 through 4 after the great year that Peterson had. Not complaining there. And then you figure out from there. You have some in-house talent in Brandon Sproat, who I highlighted, who went from single A all the way up to triple A in just 1 year. His first year in pro, past year, basically, which is so good. Or second year. They have some in-house talent, and they can, of course, seek external help in the trade market should they not land a free agent as well. Because David Stearns was heavily active in the trade market last offseason for a starter. It just never really came to closure because all teams are really having a tough time when it came to, pardon me, the budget for said players, especially in Garrett Crochet from the White Sox. You have to give up an arm and a leg for this guy, and understandably so, because of the control, how dominant he is, what have you. Those you have to, again, get creative with. Not impossible, but what's easiest is a sign. And if the Mets can land a Buehler and a Sasaki, or a Sasaki equivalent, not in the sense of talent, but in the sense of ace caliber status, like a Snell, like a Burns, I think that they're destined for greatness. Even if the Mets don't land, let's say the Mets land Walker Buehler, and let's say they land one other, another mid-level starter, like a Matthew Boyd for the back end, who broke out with the Guardians after a lot of years with injuries this past year. And then I'm trying to think of, Yusei Kikuchi would have been the perfect one for me. Like, he signed with the Angels. So I'm trying to think of another, like, shorter-term filler, or bringing back Shamanaya. Like, if, say, they got Walker Buehler and brought back Shamanaya.
I'm fine. I'll be fine with that.
I'm fine with that, too. And then, yes, you're going to have some holes, but you work on that as you go. The Mets got all the way 2 games shy of the dance when they had far from certainty in their pitching all year long.
Very true.
So
Good
if
point.
they can do that, I have confidence that they can handle it with higher expectations and a better on-field talent than what we had to start the 2024 campaign, at least.
I agree. I think you're being pretty rational about it. I hope the Mets fan can be that rational about it and look at it and say they're building. And if they're still able to add pieces while, to the point you mentioned, preserving their farm system, but also being willing, if there is a trade for a guy you can get some that has a good upside in talent in terms of an arm, and you can also have to give up some prospects for it, but it extends the potential of your team and your starting pitching staff. That's something to definitely explore, and I think it's something that David Stearns definitely will explore. I think what the Mets want is to increase the talent but keep their flexibility, which I think is the sweet spot you want to be as you get to contention and you're trying to stay in contention. It's what the Dodgers have had, but it's hard to do that. That's not easy because everybody would do it. It takes resources, it takes patience, it takes finding value on the margins, and I think that's what the Mets will try to do. And I think if they do that this offseason, even if they don't get all sexy names, you got to give David Stearns the benefit of the doubt that he can find those value. We've seen him do it once. I don't have any reason to believe he can't do it again.
And I think this is a perfect way for us to wrap up. The difference, too, the similarities, rather, and how I mentioned earlier how Steve Cohen looks at what the Dodgers just did this past offseason. Mind you, he's been trying to model the Mets after the Dodgers. And even after all these years for the big bad Dodgers that have great in-house talent, but they won a World Series where very little were actually drafted players, guys that they scouted. A lot of them were guys that they either acquired in trade, either at preliminary parts in their career in which they really exceeded. Some guys in Max Muncy, who was actually a waiver claim, but just went from being nothing with the A's to something great with the Dodgers, or a lot of big-name signings. Those external talents is what held true. Again, they had to spend $1.2 billion straight up in an offseason to say, hey, now we can finally win a championship. So to suggest that the Mets don't have a similar philosophy, but also know that there's a way to find more sustained winning than how desperate the Dodgers did to sell their soul to Japan, I really like their odds here long-term and to find this proper medium of in-house talent that they draft, that they hopefully develop to the major league level, paired with these external moves, and to have that consistency from the front office down. Having that is what's going to bring not only continuity to everything else, but it's going to bring everything in as one versus having all these little, I don't want to call them factions, but just these little niches of different groups in the clubhouse where, there's separation. Like, it really goes such a long way from the Mets label as being LOL Mets over the years. And as we talk about perception, I think it's fitting that we wrap it up with the Yankees, how they are deemed as this Yankees team, the evil empire. They've always been perceived a certain way. The Mets haven't, but they have drastically changed their public perception and narrative in a very short period of time. To what degree will that make a difference in Soto sweepstakes and negotiation? We'll find out, but it's definitely one that I think is important for fans to make sure they don't forget.
Yeah, I definitely think it is important. And I think the Mets, but I think what should be noted, Wardy, is that the Mets have changed that public perception in a short period of time because they were willing to do something that I'm not sure a lot of teams and owners are willing to do. And I go back to 2023 and them saying, hey, sunk costs with these guys. Let's sell. Now, look, Steve Cohen ate a lot of money, and it's not my money, right? So I can easily talk about that. But I thought then and there that showed me the true willingness to win. It's easy to double down and say, well, I invested in these guys, even though he looked at the team and said, this is not a winning team. We got to change. And I think the Mets thought they were going to take even more of a step back last year. And I thought the Mets were going to take a step back last year. My prediction, I thought they were going to win 83. I thought they could win between 79 and 83 games. They clearly exceeded that. Right. They exceeded that for a lot of people. But I don't think they could have got to that point to where we're talking now about them really having a chance to land Soto, them really having a chance to change the perception in New York City about that and really be players. But I think it's that the thing I'm saying is nobody's doubting about the Mets. The one thing nobody's doubting is that they want to win. That is, There's no doubt about that. The want to has been clear. It's been there. When you make that kind of move and say, hey, this is sinking, this is a sunk cost, let's get off of it, then let's retool and have the patience. Trust in the manager and the process you're bringing in. Trust in the GM and the process you're bringing in. I don't want to get all Philadelphia 76ers on people here, but what I would say to the Mets,
don't. No good will come.
No, we don't. I don't want to put that vibes out there, right? I don't want to put that vibes, but you do have to trust the process and what you're building. You do have to trust the front office, the ownership, and until they've shown you, and if you're a Mets fan and a longtime Mets fan, if you know this, there was a time you didn't ever trust the process.
Right.
You didn't have anything. You didn't trust the manager. You might not have trusted the ownership. You didn't trust the general manager. This might be the first time for a lot of Mets fans, particularly younger Mets fans, where you can sit there and say, you know what? I know what the plan is. I know this team wants to win. I'm not saying it's all going to work out, but the first step is you got to have the want to, and then the second step is you got to execute off the field and then on the field. And I think the team at least has the want to, and that's why I feel like Mets fans should at least, at a minimum, you got to be excited if you're a Mets fan, especially after this year. Got to be excited, man. Got to.
You got to be excited. Beautifully said, Dexter. Thank you so much again for coming on. This was an awesome segment. And before I let you go, please let everyone know where they can find you.
You can find me on all social media platforms at DHenryTV. Catch me on the New York Post Sports Channel along with SNY Channel. And we'll be, and it's going to heat up for us a lot. I can tell you in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure Wardy will be on with me along with other people. Cause once the Mets, whatever they do in the off season, I'm not going to put whatever positivity they do in the off season. We'll definitely be around it. This is one of the more fascinating off seasons I can remember around New York baseball in quite some time. So I think it's going to be really interesting, whether you're a Mets fan or a Yankee fan, but for the Mets fans, I know what you guys are hoping for. I understand. I understand what you guys want to happen. You want Juan Soto in Flushing away from the Yankees. And if that happens for the Mets, Wardy, I know you're going to text me if it happens. I know you're going to text me, and all my Mets fans, friends are going to text me.
Down my damn street if it happens.
You're going to have to put out some content of that because that's what the people are going to want to see.
I know.
They want to see your reaction if it happens because a lot of Mets fans are going to be happy and Yankee fans will be salty, but it'll be a fun day in New York. This is why I love what I do, so it'll be fun.
It'll be a whirlwind. Regardless, even if we're gonna get our heart broken because he goes back to the Bronx or somewhere else, we will thankfully have a result hopefully in the next 2 weeks or so. But that is Dexter Henry. Thank you guys so much for watching our latest live show here on the WardyNYM platform. If you guys would like to see Dexter back, please let us know. I think that's a resounding yes, though. There has been a lot of viewership. A lot of people were really agreeing with you, Dexter, throughout the live show, too, which was great to see the feedback on. Appreciate you taking the time this evening, my man. I look forward to chopping up with you again soon. That's Dexter Henry. This is Wardy, and this is us signing out.